Great. All right, without further ado, our last CAM talk comes to us from Scott Wintrip. And Scott, thanks to Sam Horn, is known as the sales yogi. With his book coming out this summer, Sales Yoga, Harnessing the Power of Yoga to Open More Doors and Close More Deals. And it's cool, huh? And Scott's coaching company has done consulting and coaching for some big places, big companies like Boeing and McDonald's and the American Red Cross, Procter & Gamble. He has a new bride. They've got 2 kids. He lives in Florida. Please welcome the sales yogi, Scott Wintrip.
So actually, we should start this right. So, namaste.
Namaste, baby.
And now let's talk about sales, which just seems so un-namaste-like, right? So actually, I'd like you to think about being sold to. And I want to look at your faces when I tell you this, because it's always fun to see what people's faces do when you talk about selling. And I want you to think about the feeling of being on the receiving end of a sales pitch. Yeah, the faces got a little more sour when I said that. So just quick poll with that feeling in mind, and just check yourself on this. How many of you actually can honestly say you really love to be sold to? Just raise your hand really high. There's always one weirdo in the audience. There she is. So my experience, and it's Teresa, right? Looks like Teresa, okay. It's usually for one of the 2 isms that people like to be sold to. Altruism, because you know how hard it is. Or voyeurism, because you want to see how somebody else is doing it. So is it one of those 2 isms for you? The second one. Both of them. So she's a voyeur and an altruist at the same time. Okay. So we're all in agreement we don't like to be sold to, right? Yeah? All right. Now let's talk about buying and shopping. So I heard an ooh over here. All right. So think about, you want to go buy that new handbag. That's not my thing, but I get that some people do it. My wife loves these things. I don't get it. The new car. And take out the sales part. There's no cheesy salesman here. It's just you get the new car smell, the house. Hands real high now. How many of you really, really like to buy things you enjoy? Okay, you're awake. So think about the problem here. The incredible disconnect. Everybody loves buying, but nobody likes to be sold to. What does that tell us about selling? It's being done all wrong. There are thousands of books and programs, and none of those have changed that people don't like to be sold to. One of the sayings I have is, everybody sells, but nobody really likes to be sold to. Everybody buys, and they really enjoy buying. And what's happening, there are mass defections of people moving to the internet, moving to non-sales interactions where they don't have to deal with the smarmy, the pushy, the convincing, the influencing, all these words we think about salespeople. They're moving away. Organizations are downsizing their sales teams, upsizing their internet presence. Now, this isn't just about salespeople. I wanted to make it relevant because you got to go know your audience. And this is true of coaches as well. Coaches struggle with selling. In fact, I want to tell you the story of Tara. Tara was a coach I worked with a little over a decade ago. And she came to me looking for a mentor, but she also was looking for somebody who could help with the piece she really, as she said, technical term, sucked at. I just suck at selling. And so, Scott, I need your help is what she said, so fine. So we started out the coaching, the intake, all the stuff we normally do, and I actually asked her to coach me because I want to understand her value to the people she coaches. And the picture, to do a Sam Horn up here, to wave it for you. She was so present. I never met her in person. I have no idea what she looks like. Actually, I have a mental image. I'll share that with you in a minute. She was so present. She was so persistent in her coaching, though, and she did it with an iron fist. And what I mean by that, it was a gloved iron fist where she came at you, but you just didn't see her coming. She was so kind, she was so compassionate, she was so present, and Jay's never going to forgive me for doing this, but literally during one of my coaching sessions, I pictured Jay Perry in a dress. And this is who this woman was. And I'm rooming with Jay, and he has no dresses in the closet, so let me clarify that he brought this time anyway. So this woman is just amazingly present. And when I experienced her, I thought she has all of the requisite skills to be really a good salesperson because, and I'm going to tell you things I know you know. Great salespeople are great at inquiry. They're great at listening. They're great at being present. That's coach. That's a coach, and that's Tara. So we get to the call a few sessions in where Tara is going to now sell to me. And the reason she wanted this is she developed a coaching program, quite brilliant, that she wanted to take into companies, in particular Fortune 500 companies. She came out of Fortune 500 and she understood the culture. And she went through a transformational experience in becoming a coach, left Fortune 500 and wanted to take it back in. So we get ready for the sales session. She sets up who I am. I'm a senior level VP in a Fortune 500 company. She sets this all up and she's being fully Tara. And then the sales call began. And to sum it up for you, to fast forward, it's as though a used car salesperson suddenly took over the call. She was no longer this present coach. Her tone of voice literally changed. And hi, it was the slick salesperson in a Tara kind of voice. And I was blown away. When she would ask me a question, even though she's Tara the coach, she was Ivan the terrible used car salesperson because she interrupted everything I said. She really didn't want to hear. And she kept plying me with things. And this went on for 10, 15 minutes. I lost track of time, and I couldn't wait for it to be over. And we get done, and I'm thinking, okay, she has to really understand how bad this went. But no, she said in this bright, cheery voice that was Tara, she said, so how'd I do? And I'm sitting there going, oh, crap. I've now got to tell her the truth. So I picked the most compassionate coaching question I could think of at the time, and I said, where'd Tara go? And she got it. She said, well, yeah, I know I wasn't, fully me. I wasn't my normal coach self. And she had all of these excuses. And so then I asked, after it came out of my mouth, what I thought was the silliest coaching question I'd ever asked. And I wanted to put it right. Have you ever had that experience? Something comes out of your mouth and you wish you could go right like this, push it back in? This is what happened. I said the following. I said, Tara, were you channeling dead salespeople? Because here's my experience. I swear to you that a seance must have happened during the call. And there's Tara, okay? And somehow through the channeling of spirits, a being came into her body, or multiple beings of salespeople, because her voice changed, her tone changed, her pace changed, her questions changed. Everything changed. Now, I'm thinking at this point, because I asked such a silly question, that this will be the first time I've ever been fired, so quickly in a coaching relationship. And that's not what happened. She actually said, Scott, I think that's exactly what happened. I had no clue what to do with this. I had no idea whatsoever. So, of course, I asked the most brilliant coaching question of all. You know it. Tell me more. Tell me more. And what she changed was impactful for her and life-changing for me. She said, Scott, I told you I never wanted to be one of those salespeople, yet that's exactly who I became. And I think I did it because that's what I've seen throughout my life. And I was stunned. I was like, wow. So she imitated the behaviors of people she really didn't like, really didn't respect, really didn't want to be, because she didn't feel confident. Remember, she said she really sucked at this. So we talked about it. We debriefed. She had some very specific homework, but so did I. I left that call, and I immediately sketched this. This is, again, a little over a decade ago, and from the time I sketched this to today, it hasn't changed. And I wanted to share this piece with you in particular because this transcends sales. This transcends leadership. This transcends coaching. I found in sharing this with thousands of people that this shows up again and again and again. Now, I'm going to keep talking about it in the sales context, but I wanted to give this tool to you. So when our competency confidence goes down, you like that? Yeah, we got sound effects and everything. Those are from the back of the room. We'll give applause. What happens is behavior imitation goes up. Thank you, Tyson. That was beautiful, by the way. Let's give a hand for these sound effects. That was beautiful. When competency, we set that up days ago. We planned this. We rehearsed it. He's brilliant. So when competency confidence goes down, behavior imitation goes up. That was my theory. We go back to our first speakers. and this hypothesis and then testing it out. This was my hypothesis, that what must have happened was her competency confidence got so low, her behavior imitation went up, and who did she imitate? She imitated the exact opposite of herself because she wasn't good enough, so she had to do the exact opposite. And who did she imitate? The people she really didn't like, even though she didn't want to become them. I took this back to Tara. I said, Tara, here's a picture of what happened. Is this accurate? She says, oh my gosh. I faxed it to her because this is a long time ago. And I said, Tara, show me where you were on this. And here's where she picked. All the way to the right. Is it any wonder that she became this amazing used car salesperson who was the persona of everything she hated about sales? I shared this for years with thousands of salespeople, thousands of sales leaders, and again it validated over and over again. We would watch, we would have dialogues, we would do debriefs, and every single time people would say, that's exactly what happens for me. In fact, we pinpointed it where what we saw was these salespeople could actually say who they were imitating. They would name a person, they would name a type of person that they had seen. We took high-level producers, and it was the same thing. What we found was they actually do this too. High-level producers, you would think that they don't have competency, confidence issues, but they do. And so what we found was when they were actually being the pushy, smarmy salespeople, we could actually look at those moments, and that's when their confidence dropped, and they were channeling that dead salesperson that they had seen in their previous life. But again, it didn't stop there. I took this to leaders then. I started with sales leaders. And my question was, does this happen with them as well? When that leader's being a jerk, they're a nice guy most of the time, but they're being a jerk now, is it because their competency confidence has declined and they're imitating somebody they're not? And the answer was yes. What I realized was this thing about being authentic. When we're not authentic, this is the root of being inauthentic. We so do not believe in ourselves, our own abilities, that we feel like we have to be somebody totally different. And who do we be different as? People we've seen. Because we learn as children the art of imitation. We carry that into our adulthood. This is why we see, for example, U.S. Airways. It's one of these airlines I just absolutely hate to fly because they have, still to this day, the flight attendants from hell. They're just not happy people. Having met managers, having done a little work in the organization, attitude rolls downhill. And what's happening there is these managers are emulating one another. The staff members are emulating one another. So 3 things I want to share with you from Sales Yoga, because this is my mission in Sales Yoga, is you have to be grounded. What happens is people are not grounded in themselves. And in fact, what Don and Jay are doing with Take Charge of Your Talent is brilliant, because what's happening is when somebody lacks competency, confidence, they are leaving their talent on the shelf. They don't believe in those innate abilities. And what I found was, I'll give you an example, one of the things I shared with Tara. One of the yoga principles that I use in sales yoga is called creating the yet. It's one of the hardest things for a coach to do. It's one of the hardest things for a salesperson to do, and that is create an opportunity where there is none. When they say, we don't need your coaching, Barry. When they say, Val, you know what, we've got an internal resource here. Most coaches, from my experience, okay, not a problem. I'm so coach-like, I'm not going to push anything on you. What we talked about with Tara, Tara's very well read. And so what I suggested to Tara was, keep reading the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the Economist, which she reads daily. And the next time you hear that, ask a provocative question about their industry. See what happens. So that's what she did. She went into a Fortune 500 company, was sitting down with a senior level executive, C-suite. She's got great contacts. And it was a courtesy meeting. He knew her through a friend. So happy to meet you, but Tara, we don't need you. So Tara created the yet. And where create the yet comes from, how many of you do yoga? So are there postures you've not done as of yet? Are there things like, touching your toes and not bending your knees that you haven't done yet? Yes. Yet is an acronym. It stands for You're Eligible To. You're eligible to. You're eligible to be able to grab those toes eventually if you keep at it. Just like Tara was eligible to win business in places where she didn't think there was any. She asked this buyer, he said, well, thanks for coming in, but we really don't need you. She said, not a problem. I actually had an intriguing question. I was reading the Wall Street Journal, and she talked about some government regulation. And she talked about, so I'm curious how that's going to impact your business. And for the next 20 minutes, he talked about how that's going to impact his business. She asked questions to keep the conversation going. And as the conversation went along, she kept guiding the conversation, and he got to a point, and he said, you know, I never realized what difficulties this was going to create for our business. Do you think you could help me with that? And of course, she said yes, because she created the yet. So, what's your yet? What's your yet in regards to creating business? What's your yet in regards to expanding your practice? If you think that your yet is, I'm not good at selling, but I could be, I invite you to just embrace this one key technique, because everybody sells, but nobody likes to be sold to. Everybody buys and they like to buy, and if you create buying experiences, you don't have to sell because you're grounded in your competency, and you don't have to imitate dead salespeople or even dead coaches. Thank you very much. So these are your 15 minutes, and we're going to have a conversation. If you want to ask me questions later about this, other sales yoga techniques, the beauty of this book is that it's very grounded in a lot of yoga principles and common sense and coaching. So rather than stand up here and share with you 5 techniques that you already know, I'd rather have a conversation with you about these 2 things. And so 2 things that showed up for me, although it could be a conversation about anything you heard me talk about, but these 2 showed up for me in regards to what would we want to talk about. So the first one was, I'm curious to hear how has competency, confidence, and behavior imitation shown up? That's shown up for you personally or shown up for your clients. Alternative is, I'm curious, how else can yoga be used as a metaphor? So we'll have microphones. We got them ready to go. So either question.
I have a comment on the yoga, and I haven't done a lot of it, but what I really love about it happened to come from one instructor who said, it's all a practice, and so there's no achievement. But also, she had us picture our mats, and that we would release whatever energy wasn't useful to us before we started the practice, and that the energy would go into the floor and be there for someone else and come back as a different energy.
Okay.
So, realizing that, I'm not quite sure how it relates, but I put it out on the floor.
Well, and it's Gail, right? You know, Gail, one of the things I find interesting about sales is salespeople do not practice. They just go sell and they practice on their customers. I work with many coaches, whether it's mentoring them or helping them sell, and they don't practice the sales part of the conversation. I watch leaders who are trying to sell ideas, and they don't practice it before they go do the sell. And so this practice that you talked about in sales, I talk about the practice makes profits, not perfect, because there is no such thing as perfection. You can always perfect it. And part of it is energetic. You know, part of the energy we get when we're very present with our customers is when we actually practice it ahead of time, because we can then channel that energy because we know how to flow it. Good. How does competency, competence / behavior imitation, that inverse relationship, show up? Right up here.
About 10 years ago, no, 13 years ago, I went from being a lawyer to learning to be a coach. And of course, in the beginning, I didn't have a lot of business, and so I took advantage of the time to learn yoga at about the same time. And I realized recently that in my mind, somehow they're muddled up, and the things I learned from yoga are what really helped me go from being a lawyer where I was an expert to being a coach where I had to let go of expertise and just be present. So I wrote a piece for a little PBS website recently on how yoga helped me create my coaching career. And I mention it just because I got so much feedback from people saying, you know, that's interesting. Yoga helped me start my new career too. That being a learner, kind of letting go of expertise, being willing to stumble, learning to kind of meditate when you're not feeling confident. Apparently, that's a path for lots of people. So I just share that with you.
It is, and if you think about, and let's go back to salespeople for a minute, how many of you have coached salespeople, sales organizations, sales leaders? Can we agree that they tend to be fairly ungrounded? Yes? So, part of bringing this to sales organizations and to sales leaders and leaders in general is this, when you describe this, there's this grounding that comes. And just think about the exercise that we did today. I don't know about the rest of you, but the experience I had in just looking in somebody else's eyes, how grounding that is. And you said the word presence. I felt more present today, although I felt incredibly wait, it's really late on Wednesday here. I felt more present than I had all week. The picture I had is, I wonder if salespeople ever looked in somebody's eyes that deeply, just how present they would be. They would create what I call sales flow, instead of what they really do is sales force, because they force their idea on people. And sales flow is grounded in this idea of pure presence. So thank you. In the middle, got a mic coming to you.
Competency, confidence, and behavior imitation. I've started working with college athletes, and I noticed that when their confidence goes down, their pace goes into high gear as they imitate what they think good performance looks like. And so it's sports yoga to get them to slow down and get back in themselves.
So am I guessing in those circumstances that their actual performance, even though they had heightened their body in that way, wasn't very good?
Oh, it goes to hell.
Yeah, it goes to hell. Technical term, goes to hell.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what happens here too, is anytime competency, confidence goes down, behavior imitation goes up, and performance, whether it's a leader, a coach, a sales organization, somebody working on an assembly line, absolutely goes to hell. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to share this model with you is, again, idea I'm sure that's not new to you. I saw a lot of nods when I got to this place. What I found was when I've shown this process visual, given that so many people are visual, they finally get it. They've heard it before, but they finally get it. And the aha moment that people have said is, so that's what happens. Okay, in the middle.
So I'm just curious. I have a client, and I'm sure many of you have these clients as well, that all of a sudden are now asked to take over a role or a task that they weren't hired for. They perhaps have never done before, but the person who used to do it was just downsized, right-sized, they're gone. So they don't really have the competency, so hence they don't have the confidence. What is the model that you would propose to help them not show up in that behavior imitation space?
I'll push back and say they do have the competency, they just need to learn to transfer it. We've all heard about transferable skill. There's some linkage here, and one of the techniques that sales yoga draws into is an anchoring technique. And anchoring's not a new technique, it's how do you anchor the new desired behavior with a previous behavior. And this is where the coaching comes in. So it's a conversation with them about what are things that you've done that are similar or even dissimilar, and listening for those pieces that can be drawn in. Talking to them, asking them, how would you use this in this role? And what's interesting, and what you bring up, Janine, is a perfect scenario of where competency, confidence can be at its lowest, because the assumption is, I don't know how to do this. Just like Tara said, I don't know how to sell. What if you did? Well, when you talk about those skills, how could you possibly use these skills that we've identified that are even remotely similar in this role? And what's interesting about that is often they'll do certain things even better because they're coming at it from a fresh perspective. In fact, the assumption often is the leader who left, they were doing it this way, so it must be the right way. And everybody makes that assumption that that's the right way. Yet the new person comes along, does it in a slightly different way based on the competencies that they do have, and they find out it's done even better. And what happens in those cases is people take notice. This was where a lot of true innovation comes in, because what happens then is people go, oh, we don't have to do the same old, same old. We can actually do something different. Does that make sense? Let's come to Don, and then we got a couple over here. So again, a reminder, I'm going to point you here, but anything you want to talk about in regards to this, it's our conversation.
Great. Well, Scott, this is very provocative, and it's really an exciting model because it stimulates a lot of thinking. And one of the questions that I'm having is that when confidence goes down, usually fear rises. And the fear, as we know from the neuroscience and psychology, sort of gets the amygdala going, shuts down the prefrontal cortex and cerebral lobes that are people's better thinking. So I'm kind of wondering if, yes, they may default to a behavior imitation, but they might also be defaulting to, an incomplete or just a survival kind of response that may not be any imitation of anything good, bad, or whatever elsewhere, but just a coping response. I was curious if you could help me understand that a little bit more.
Well, sure. Think about where the coping response comes from. The coping response typically comes from something they've seen, heard, or experienced. It's always one of those three things. This incomplete thing you said, Don, was when you're just watching somebody do something, it's inherently incomplete because you've only watched somebody do it. So you're looking at it from the outside. You don't necessarily know the breakdown of the competencies that it took for them to do it. All of us, for example, could watch somebody in Cirque du Soleil do the thing they do and go, they make that look easy. But how did they get to that point? Well, they had to, one, be willing to be hung in the air upside down like that, and then all the other things that went with it. So the fear mechanism is interesting in this, in that it does trigger that response from what I've seen with salespeople and leaders and coaches and other people, and it helps them draw on whatever's immediately accessible. And because the belief in themselves is so low, they think of the exact opposite, and they just channel that, again, like it's a dead salesperson or leader, and emulate that behavior that's incredibly incomplete. Did that get to the essence?
Yeah, I was curious about what you said were the three sources of what people drive back.
See, hear, and experience. Those three things. So what they saw somebody do, what they experienced in being in an interaction, because that's different than just seeing. They had the experience of seeing that person do it, but being involved in it. And then they hear. They heard how somebody did something, or because some of these behaviors are over the phone. They hear somebody do something on the phone, deliver information, engage in a sales pitch. So it's always one of those three things that becomes the method of imitation. Susan.
Okay, so Scott, I see this as a situation that you don't want to have occurring. And on the other hand, I'm sort of trying to tease out the difference between this and often when people are learning something, you need a certain amount of imitation. So a new coach might imitate their own coach or some other leading coaches while they're trying to find their own voice.
Sure.
So how does that fit?
Well, imitation is not inherently bad. If you think about what my son's learning to drive right now, so just continue blessings my way, if you would, please. And so I watch him, and I watch my son imitate me as a driver, which is very humbling, I might add, including my son dropped his first F-bomb in my presence. I don't do it often, but he just looked at me and said, well, that's what you do. So, imitation inherently is not bad. The problem with imitation is the person doing the imitating modeling the right behavior. And therein lies the issue. So if we've got a good coach-mentee relationship, that's a wonderful thing. What happens in competency confidence is people remember the exact opposite, and therein lies the issue. So even if it's done right, and there are cases where that's the situation, that's where it's inauthentic. They're trying to be somebody they are not. So in a sales situation, it may have been the most beautiful sales presentation that they have seen done, but they're trying to do it and they can't pull it off because it's not them. Yes.
A member of my tribe here.
Hello, Mike.
Hello. It's kind of building off of that a little bit, and you may have covered this, but I want to challenge a little bit that when competency confidence goes down, behavior imitation goes up, production or performance has to go down. Getting back to the fact that maybe it is a model that's aligned with who I'm aspiring to be or the skills I'm aspiring to develop. So there's a process to get there. So isn't there a benefit or value when you're coaching someone to just replace the model they're using perhaps with a positive model or a beneficial model or something that's actually going to help them develop rather than something that's going to take them away from their authenticity?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. What you're saying is we need to get them from the right to the left. And that's what this is all about. What competencies do they have? That's the model. It's what coaching is all about, which is why I shared it today, is if you can tie them into their own competencies. They may not have all of the competencies that they need, but they'll have enough of them that they can build on those competencies. Because what happens then is performance that you talked about, you're right, performance tends to go down on the right-hand side, but it doesn't always stay down, and it doesn't always go immediately down. What's interesting is performance will go up and down as somebody engages in behavior imitation, whether it's a leader or a salesperson. The issue here often in those cases is sustainability. They can't sustain the result because they truly don't have the competency. They're just faking it. If we get them on the left-hand side through coaching, which is the system that I hear you talk about, we're tying them into something that they really, really, really know. And we can build from there. And now we build on authenticity, we build on core skill sets, we build on something that is familiar to them, and we go from there. So I'm officially out of time, but because it's Babette who wants to say something, I'm saying that's probably okay and they're not going to turn my mic off.
Don't be too sure. What just occurred to me when I was sitting back there and this came up in the competency confidence, and when your confidence goes down is parenting. And when you're dealing with children and your confidence goes down in your competency, the behavior that you often imitate is the behavior of your parents. Whoa. And sometimes that's, that can be something you swore you'd never do.
Yes.
But when that confidence goes down, that's, I think, it's a great example.
That's why I shared this with you of the things that I thought would be most useful as coaches. When this showed up in my life, thank you to Tara. And I called Tara to tell, and her name's not Tara, by the way, so don't try to figure out who this is. This is somebody well known in our community. And I changed her name to protect the innocent because she is. She was so thrilled because she said, Scott, that was the day that changed my life. And we have this debate whose life was changed more. Because one of the first places this showed up for me, to Babette's point, was I was a fairly new dad when this all showed up. And about a week after I drew this drawing, I literally channeled my mother, who thankfully is still alive. And when I got done with that, I went back and I looked at the chart and I just drew a line of exactly where I was at. And I was on the very right. I could have taken it off the chart because I was in a situation with my son I just told myself I didn't know how to handle. All right, we have to end with a cheesy moment, so would you please stand? Raise your right hand because it's now time for the Sales Yoga Mantra, which is my form of an oath. So repeat after me, and state your name. Okay, so from now on, Tony is to be known as state your name, just so you know. Do solemnly promise to become a sales yogi in my coaching practice. Because what I have to provide is that valuable. And I will never again doubt my competency. Because behavior imitation of crappy coaches sucks. So help me, coaching gods. Have a seat. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Scott. Well done. And in the name of yoga, I took off my shoes after 3 days. And now we're going to break till 6:30 to party. Thank you for coming to Camp 2014. I'm projecting into the future, 2013. See you at 6:30.